Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to your new episode of the Unfiltered Truth. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Smith, joined by my co-host, James Shook. I hope everybody's doing well on this rainy day in Georgia and everywhere else around that you may be watching from. We're going to cover a couple, call them controversial topics today. We're going to cover, obviously, the Jacob Blake shooting, break it down as best we can with facts, cover basically the media and their quickness to report things and them inciting the riots. And then another topic that James specifically wants to cover is the lack of respect for law enforcement and why it's kind of leading all these incidents. So, James, how you been?
Yeah, I've been well. Little rain going on outside here today, and we've had quite a run of sunny days going on. So in some ways it's refreshing, and then in some ways, it's puts a little bit of a damper outside. But hey, everything's dry inside, and we're here inside, so let's get it going.
Yep. Yeah, man. You want to go and give a shout out to our sponsors, and we'll start breaking it down?
Yeah. So sponsors, I want to give a shout out to North Cobb Spine and Nerve again. North Cobb Spine and Nerve. That's northcobbspine.com. They have, again, provided us with some generous donations, and we appreciate them for that. If you guys have any chiropractic or physical medicine needs, be sure and check out North Cobb Spine and Nerve. That's in Ackworth, Georgia. That's northcobbspine.com. Other than that, so we don't have any, I don't think we had any big time fights to really talk about or any controversial fights to talk about this past weekend, unless you know of any.
No, Frankie Edgar made his comeback, won, I believe, a split decision in his fight. I thought he won the fight to kind of keep it quick. He won, in my opinion. I know the striking was very close, but it always goes back to don't leave it to the judges if you don't want them to decide your fate.
Yeah, absolutely. So Frankie's been fighting for so long. I mean, it's amazing that we're still hearing about Frankie Edgar being in the ring. It seems, it's a decade or so now. You'll see his name mentioned all the way back, as far as I can remember, being involved in mixed martial arts. I've heard Frankie Edgar. So yeah, man, hats off to that guy. He seems to stand the test of time.
But yeah, he does, and I believe he's fighting at 55 or 45 now, so he's down a couple divisions from where he won the title at, and apparently everybody said that's where he was be the best at. We'll see. I mean, he beat a top 5 guy in his first fight back in a couple of years. So yeah, congrats to him, man. He's fighting Father Time and winning right now. So hopefully he continues a good run. He's a good ambassador for the sport, so it'll be good for them, man.
Yeah, I don't think he didn't have any problems making weight or anything, did he?
No, he was good to go, man. He made it easy. He's a pro. That's what they said. Like he's one of those guys where he's a professional and he's going to make his weight and get his paycheck. So good for him for that. We got some big fights coming up here soon. We can get into maybe the next episode when it's a little closer. Paulo Costa, Israel Adesanya coming up, and a couple other good ones. So it'll be good. But here we go, man. Another week and America is on fire yet again. As everybody saw, the thumbnail footage or thumbnail picture for the podcast today was the sign at the church with the BLM slogan on, or Black Lives Matter on it, on fire. And here we go. We have another police shooting. I believe it happened 2 days ago now. Jacob Blake is the man who was shot by the police. The news reported it as a man was shot in the back several times by the police, which, he did get shot in the back. That's true. But there's so much more to the story with all this. The news, basically initially reported it as he was breaking up a fight, and he was just, shot for no reason. Well, come to find out, he had an active arrest warrant for rape. It's 3rd-degree sexual assault out of Wisconsin, which if you Google the Wisconsin law, that is sex with another person without their consent. And for all my lady listeners out there, I'm pretty sure when somebody has sex with you without your consent, you would call that rape. So let's call it for what it is. He was wanted for rape, domestic abuse, and criminal trespass. At some point in time, he ended up in a fight with the police, which we'll show that footage here in just a second, and then was shot. A second angle of that video came out today. So I guess let's play that video to start with, James, and then we'll break down a couple other things to maybe get some facts out there for people so they can start making an educated assumption instead of what the news says. So let's get to that clip. And I want, James, if you will, break it down from a training standpoint for us once we get done with it. And here we go.
Yeah, this is the alternate angle.
Yes. go with that. So that's the alternate angle that came out today. I'll break down a couple little quick things unless you break it down from the DT standpoint. I've had a lot of people or seen a lot of people being like, why didn't they tase him? Well, there's an article that came out in the Chicago Tribune, I believe it was, or there's a Fox news station right here, and I'll share this here for you guys in our comments so you can read the entire article yourself. Basically where the gentleman that filmed the entire incident, the first angle that everybody's seen, he even said he heard the officers telling him to drop the knife. He heard them saying all these other things. He actually saw a female police officer tase Blake before they went to the point where they shot him. And so that's kind of where we're at. I'll show a still picture from a video after you break this down. James will kind of go from there. Give me your thoughts on the alternate angle, what you see could have been done better, what couldn't have been, just your opinion.
Okay. So, and I'm going to ask a question back of you.
Sure.
The taser, and I know that you're a trained taser instructor.
Yes.
Still qualified or certified as a taser instructor. Because I see so many of these recently where the taser seems to be very ineffective, and I don't know if that's because tasers have a wide margin of error, or if it takes an even further skill set or training to be able to use these properly. But I'll look at a couple of things that I see that are similarities between a few of these cases, is that the taser does not appear to me anyway to be doing what it's intended to do, or what it's being carried for. So I just see so many instances where even when they tase the person, they're not getting the cooperation out of them, and they're also unable to still cuff them. So I guess my question to you would be that what really is the expectation of the taser? Because I'm seeing the common thread here is that the person is, disruptive in some way, or they're resisting to some degree. And then once the taser gets used, it seems to be extremely ineffective. And I don't see where, even when the taser gets them to the ground, I can't even remember the last time I saw an officer in one of these videos actually achieve getting the cuffs onto the suspect after being tased.
Sure. So you know a couple good things. So in that video, as far as tasers go, usually the bigger the probe spread on the taser, the more effective it is, because you achieve what's called neuromuscular incapacitation. Basically, your muscles lock up. So it's NMI. If anybody can Google that, and you can see what it does. Well, for that to be effective, you have to be pretty far back and attack some muscle groups. In that video, say that they're at the car with them and they're a couple feet away. Your taser probe spread for the two probes that come out is going to be like that. So at that point, you're at only pain compliance, which can be easily fought through. Now, the nominal or the best taser shot that you would like to get on somebody is where you split the belt line, where you get an upper body taser shot with a hit with one probe and another hit, like, say on the back of your quad, your hamstring area, something like that. That's where you get that surfboard effect, where you see people really lock up and they can't fight. That's where you see that, and that's where a taser is effective. A taser as pain compliance tool is, to my opinion and my training and my experience, is no more effective than getting pepper sprayed or hit with an asp or punched, because it just hurts like hell. It just happens to be a different kind of hurt because it's electricity, if that makes any sense. Another thing people need to think about with a taser as well that can happen is you get what's called a probe disconnect, where, in the case that somebody's wearing baggy clothing, which it doesn't look like Blake was. He looks like he had on a tank top, I think some black jean shorts. The couple times I watched the video, I think that's right. But if you missed with one of the probes, which is very easy because it's not as precise as a bullet, it's not nearly that accurate, you're only going to get pain compliance as well. And even then, it's minimal, very minimal pain compliance, because it's like a bee sting at that point and nothing more. Lastly, the problem that you have, and it's hard to train it, is handcuffing somebody, what they call handcuffing under power, okay? When you shoot somebody with a taser, you have 5 seconds to handcuff that person from the time they're shot initially with a taser to the time they hit the ground. To cuff them, you have 5 seconds. Once that 5 seconds is up, you either have to have them handcuffed, right, under power, which you can do without getting shocked if you do it right, or you're going to have to apply a second 5-second stun to the person, which causes a whole other issue because it's a separate use of force. You have to justify that separate use of force, and it's no different than, you have to do all that. So a taser is a good tool in your tool belt, but it's not the be all end all. A taser is not 100% effective. I shot a lady, or attempted to shoot a lady with a taser one day that was being non-compliant, very combative. and she actually took a fighting stance with me. And when I hit her with one of the probes in the chest, another one bounced off the face of her watch just because of the way she stuck her hands up when I shot her. It bounced off the face of her watch, and there I am, holding a taser in my hand that does me absolutely no good, and the fight's on. So tasers are good if used correctly, or even if they're used properly, sometimes they don't work. If they do what it's intended to do, they're a great tool, but people get over dependent, I think, on stuff in their tool belt. We kind of covered that in episode 1 of what we did with the art of the choke and defensive tactics. And I'd like you to hit on some things, James, that could have been done when they had him on the ground at the car, because it looked like he was on both knees. And it looked like he was able to fight back up despite there being 3 police officers around him. So give me your take on that.
So again, a common thing that it appears from the video, and I know we have limited sight picture there as far as the actual details or the fine details. I want to say that the most common thing that I see between any of these most recent attempts for the officers to contain someone is the lack of physicality.
Yes.
And I don't know if I don't know if it comes from, the protocol, which we've talked about before. Obviously, they're heavily scrutinized right now. Everything's being videotaped. They do have, protocol that tells them when they can do and what they can do, depending on what the suspect's doing in response. Yep. But the thing that I keep seeing is the reluctancy or the hesitation to actually go hands-on when we are attempting to go hands-on. It's I'll give you an analogy or something you can relate it to. It's like trying to take someone down, or in judo, trying to perform a throw from the feet. The person doing the throwing or the person doing the takedown, and this goes for wrestling as well, has to be willing to go to the ground to get the other person to the ground. If you're not committed to using your energy and your force to carry to the ground with the individual, it will be very difficult for you to get them to the ground. And so what I see with a lot of these instances is everyone wants to stand back and use their extremities in their hands to just try to, it's almost like playing patty cake, right? They're trying to keep themselves disengaged from the suspect at the same time that they're attempting to engage the suspect. And I know that's an oxymoron of itself, or it sounds completely ludicrous, but this is what's going on. And a lot of it could be hesitation, due to just the lack of confidence, lack of training. There's a variety of reasons that this could be, but it seems to happen over and over. And the common thread between these instances that I see is the lack of, once we've determined there's going to be physical hands put on the suspect, and we're in an arresting manner, or we're in a detaining manner, or attempting to cuff manner, we need to go to some physical action with enough force so that we don't allow the containment to slip away and then further cause the suspect to become more confident that they can escape. And right. It's one of the same factors that I think you pointed out with military and LEO last time we were on the show, was that the surprise amount of force and the violence of the action a lot of times will cause the other person, in this case a suspect, to tend to back down some, or to understand that they don't really have a means of escape, and then it's probably not going to happen for them to get out of the situation. Whereas if you use if you start with good contact, you break that, or you're iffy, you're going in and out, you're back and forth with contact, they start to build more confidence, and ultimately they may find an escape route and attempt to take that route.
Sure. And so to play the other end of that as well, obviously we're talking about when it's a hands-on situation, when there's no weapons involved. That's kind of what we're trying to tell everybody for that. Now, there is an article that came out, again, and that's the one I shared, the Fox 6 article, which is a local Fox affiliate in Wisconsin, where the gentleman that filmed everything said, and I'm trying to find the quote from the article of what he said right here. Oh, I heard them telling him, drop the knife. When I was recording and looking, I didn't see a knife. So he said he didn't see a knife. That's fine. But I've got a still shot from his video up here linked. So I was looking at his hands when they said drop the knife. I didn't see one. Okay. Is it quite possible the gentleman didn't see the knife? 100%. But what he did confirm, and I think this is a big deal that everybody needs to pay attention to here, And this is something that police officers do in their investigations is they ask witnesses, and why we train verbal commands being so important. This guy was pretty far away filming the video. He was in his house. If everybody goes and reads the article that we linked, but yet he still heard the officer say, "Drop the knife, drop the knife, drop the knife." Well, if the guy has a knife in his hands, and obviously that changes from going hands on, because neither one of us is going to try to, put him in a choke or something like that. Because what this knife looks like to me, if this is the knife in his hand, I had a friend say it could be sunglasses or cell phone. Could be. Not going to say it's not, but I'm going to show you what I think it looks like to me. And I want you all to make your educated guess or assumption or opinion based on this. And I'm going to link it right now. And stop this one. We need a producer, James. Application window. Here's what that curved knife looks a lot like to me. Okay. It looks like it's called a karambit. That's what this looks like to me. And just from what I see, the way he's gripping it, if you see how the grips are on this hand, him having, I believe it was his left hand he had it in, he had kind of an overhand grip with it curved down, which is exactly how you do grip those knives. I actually had one of my defensive tactics instructors who was very good with one of these knives, and you can do a ton of damage. So what I would encourage the general public to do is not listen to the media, because there's this constant police shoot black person. I'm sick of it. I'm just going to be real. I'm sick of it. The police shot a person. I don't look at that. They shot a person. Let's leave it at that. Okay. The facts that we know, based on witness accounts that filmed it, they heard him giving verbal commands to drop a knife. Why did he go back to his car? I don't know. Was he retrieving a weapon out of his car? I don't know. Was he trying to drive away because he had an active warrant for his arrest? I don't know. He tried to go back to his car, but as a former police officer, if there's been accounts saying that the guy said, "I'm going to go get my gun. I got something for you," something along those lines, and he went back to his car. The police officers are under no duty to wait for that guy to produce a weapon. If they have reasonable belief that he is getting a weapon to do them harm, they can use deadly force to protect themselves. Police don't have time to let the person get a weapon and point it at them before they react. If y'all go back to our episode, Lance LaRusso, I believe it's episode 4 or 5, he talks about reaction versus action and why that's so important. So people need to be understanding and wait for the facts to come out of the case before jumping to conclusions and burning down an entire city. I'll leave next for you. Go ahead.
Yeah, so getting back to just the breakdown of the physical altercation, he's clearly being detained. Is there any question about that? I don't think there's any question.
No, they were trying. I mean, at that point, if it's come to the point where the police have used force on you or done anything like that, you are under arrest. They don't have to tell you that you're under arrest. He, at that point, knows he's not free to leave because he's been tased. He's been taken to the ground. Or any person with half a brain understands, okay, I'm under arrest at this point. There's no question.
Yeah. So what it comes down to for me is just going to be, it's going to be it's an individual's responsibility to carry themselves in a manner that's conducive to society. And Lance spoke on this a little bit when we had him on the show as well. About crimes against society, and this is something that gets overlooked a lot. So in this particular instance, again, from the physical standpoint, I did see it looked like a reluctancy for them to go very much hands-on with him. We could talk about whether or not that would have, yielded a different outcome, on a different day, I guess. But the outcome is what it is now. I think he was shot 7 times, and he remains in the hospital at this point, right?
Correct, and so he is supposedly paralyzed at this point, is what I'm seeing in news reports.
So yeah, I mean, it's personal responsibility to not fight the police. I mean, I'm not sure what the context was of the initial engagement, and what caused the police to arrive on scene or who made a call. But once you are in the altercation with police officers, I mean, it is up to you as an individual to carry yourself in a fashion that doesn't lead to something like this. And one of the common things we're seeing in these cases is that this isn't someone sitting still that was, eating ice cream on the side of the road outside of an ice cream parlor and just minding their own business, and cops came up and started harassing them, and then it ultimately shoots them. I mean, these are instances where there's clearly an altercation already going on. Cooperation's being asked for, and cooperation's not being given. So when you have active, resisting arrest, is that a felony or a misdemeanor?
And so in Georgia, you have two types of resisting arrest. You have, it's called obstruction in Georgia. You have what's called misdemeanor obstruction, which is basically running away from a scene or something like that. And then you have felony obstruction, which is offering violence to a police officer while they're trying to effect an arrest, i.e. punching them, offering physical violence beyond just passive resistance. Like if somebody's holding on to a steering wheel, they're not really offering you violence, so it's still kind of misdemeanor. And even up to the point if, honestly, if they threw him on the ground and he wasn't trying to punch him at that point, it could have been misdemeanor, could have been felony, just depends on what he did.
So at the point where they're tased and they're trying to get cuffs on him and he's resisting cuffing, is that still obstruction? Or are we getting into territory for resisting?
It could be. It's still misdemeanor obstruction, in my opinion, at that point. I mean, that's what I've been given as a charge multiple times. The only time I was ever really able to get a felony obstruction charge is if somebody offered violence to me beyond passive resistance, which you can say that, or even it's active resistance, even if they're actively not trying to let you get their hands, like tucking them underneath them, trying to get up, that kind of stuff. As long as they're not trying to assault you as a person, most of the time you're only going to get a misdemeanor charge out of that. Some judges will give you a felony for that, but 9 times out of 10 is going to get pled down. But either way, he's under arrest. So,
so one of the elements I think that's missing here, at least from the suspect's perspective here, is that he just seems to have either no understanding or he absolutely blatantly disregards intentionally that he can't leave the scene from the law enforcement officer that's previously already been trying to arrest him. And at some point, the general public has to understand the responsibility. I think someone in the video is yelling for the mother to get back away.
Yes.
It sounds like it's coming from this camera angle somewhere in the vicinity of, I don't know if those were apartment complex or what was going on. I don't know where that was at, but it appears that someone was yelling, you need to back up, you need to back up, you need to get away. And they were encouraging one of the bystanders that was standing, in close proximity. They were instructing them to come back. That was the smartest thing that I heard in the video the entire time.
Nailed it.
I mean, you could talk about, what's right and what's wrong. I mean, that's what the court's for ultimately. Today you've got video coverage of everything that goes on. So at the very least, or let's say the very worst in this case, you get arrested. Sure, they might rack some charges up on you. They take you to court. You've got video proof that maybe you didn't do anything wrong, and you have it settled in court. And I know people at the scene, no one wants to do that, right? I mean, if you're wrongfully accused of something, it is not in your best interest to further your charges or give the law enforcement and the DA real charges against you in an attempt to just keep saying, no, I didn't do that. So you're not allowed to arrest me. You're not allowed to contact me. You're not allowed to detain me. And at some point, there's got to be a better understanding with the public. And this is going to lead us into what you'd spoke of that I've been harping on a lot lately is the blatant disregard and disrespect for law enforcement officers and the instances in which you may be, interacting with a law enforcement officer that's not either that's favorable or not favorable for you. And there has to be a respect factor. There has to be an authority factor to it. And I'm just not seeing it. I don't know if these people are just not taught this. I would find it hard to believe that you don't know this with everything that's going on nowadays and all of the coverage that these events and these instances have been getting. I think it would be hard to say that I didn't know I should keep my hands up. I didn't know I shouldn't put my hands where the cop couldn't see them. This excuse is just not going to work. I mean, even further and beyond ignorance of the law, there is just no excuse for no one nowadays not knowing that they can't put their hands in places that the officer can't see. They can't run back and dive into their car, especially since they've already previously been under arrest. So,
sure.
And then I think you've got criminal history pulled up right here, and I guess you're getting ready to talk about that. This is what the officers see when they run the background and run the charges on the guy, or they run the priors. And if you want to say that this should not have an effect on it, then you're just not being real, and you're just not giving the officers the safety that they deserve when they're on the job.
Sure. So let's break down how a police encounter starts. Let's give the guy the benefit of the doubt. He was there breaking up a fight. He was a witness to a crime that took place. Okay. That's all he is at this point. He's a witness to a crime. He is the upstanding citizen that everybody says he was. I'll give him the benefit of that doubt right now. Police are called to the scene to break up the fight. They are trying to figure out what's going on. Hey, sir, can I have your name? Can I have your date of birth? Well, why do you need my name and date of birth? I have to put it in my report. You're the one that called us. I have a reason to ask you for your name and date of birth as a police officer at that point. And you're under a duty to give it to me, especially in Georgia. That's, you have to give me your date of birth. Most of what would happen at that point if they ran Mr. Blake's information, this warrant was filed in Kenosha County, Wisconsin, which is the same county where he was shot and wounded at. It was filed, as you can see clearly, on July 6th of 2020. His name's right there. It's got his date of birth, his address. I'm not sure if that's where the incident happened or not. Maybe it was. Who knows? But they were called to a domestic dispute. So I want you all to remember this. They were called out to a domestic is what everybody's saying now. Let's go down here and look at his charges. And again, this isn't saying he's guilty, but he has a warrant and he has to go to jail to at least post a bond to be able to get out to start defending himself. You can't defend yourself if you're dead. So you have to go to jail and you have to bond out. That's procedure. So here you go. Criminal trespass to dwelling, and the modifier is domestic abuse. Yeah, and that's a misdemeanor. Third-degree sexual assault, as I said earlier in the podcast, in Wisconsin, that is non-consensual sex with another person. In Georgia, that would be called rape. They just have sexual assault in Wisconsin. They have different degrees of it. If there's gang rape involved, it goes up further. If serious bodily harm happens in the rape, that's another degree of rape. Or if the person is impregnated in the rape, that's your first and second degrees right there. And then you have disorderly conduct. And then you have another modifier, domestic abuse. Well, that's a huge deal because that tells you that he's a domestic violence suspect. He's a suspect in a third-degree sexual assault or rape. And I would venture to say that's probably why he didn't want to comply and go back to jail. That's probably why he was fighting with the police officers. Initially, sure, he could call the police out there because I'm trying to break up a fight. I can tell you I had the exact same kind of an incident happen, but it went much better. I got called out to an entering auto call. There's a gentleman, he was actually, for those of you that watched Last Chance U, I'm not going to name his name because I don't want to put his business out there, but he was on that show. He used to play linebacker for UGA. I ran his name to put his information in the report. He was a victim. He had an active warrant for his arrest, and he's a big dude. He's like 6'3", like 260. He's a monster. And but guess what he did? Hey, Sergeant Smith, yeah, I know, man. This warrant's bull crap. It's dismissed. It's all crap. This county, they told me it was done with, but I was like, hey, man, I get it. We had a conversation. I handcuffed him, and he went to jail. And we still talk to this day on Instagram. He's like, thanks for everything you did for me that day. It sucks that we had this encounter, but at least it was cool. And I was like, well, you were cool when I was cool. So there you go. It takes two to tango, one way or another. So that said, if he had complied, gone to jail, and just bonded out on his charges, he wouldn't be paralyzed and he wouldn't be sitting in the hospital right now. I can safely say that.
Well, there is no right for the police to allow him to continue on his commute or his daily travels with once he's had interaction with them and they've discovered that he has a felony warrant for him. I mean,
Correct.
this is the duty of the police officers to handle these instances, very specifically these instances, actually, which is why they run your information upon first contact. So, with that being said, what kind of argument can you really make for, that there was no resisting in this case, or, and then get into the deadly force or the use of force is a separate issue beyond where we started the arrest. We've got the taser. Again, I saw officers standing way too far away from him at the point where we need to cuff him. To be honest with you, I can't even tell there was ever actually cuffs like drawn from the belt and even put towards him. So I mean, either you're going to arrest someone or you're not. So, and that's as much as I'll say to try to critique from this video, even though we shouldn't be critiquing it, but we are to a certain degree. That's as much as I'll say that I want to critique the officers in this case, right? Because at the end of the day, the officers are called to respond to a call. They didn't ask to be there. They didn't ask for this guy to have a felony warrant that they have to address once they get on scene. And if for anyone that wants to argue that there was no reason whatsoever, that it's just obvious, no reason whatsoever, this guy was gunned down. I'm not sure if anybody's saying it was race related, but and I know there's reports of it or whatnot, but at the bare minimum, if I gave everyone that is opposing that, if I gave them the benefit of the doubt and said they were right, okay, you number one, you can't turn away from the police officers and put your hands in places where they can't see as they continue to give you commands and you continue to resist. And then when you go into your vehicle where they can't see what you're doing and they've told you to show their hands and you don't show your hands and you continue to try to evade them, you are putting yourself in a really bad position, whether it's legal, whether it's justified, whether it's unjustified or illegal. You are putting yourself at a massive risk. And at this point, it appears to me with a lot of these videos that's come out recently in several different cases that these guys were okay with taking that risk. And it's unfortunate what happens to them as a result. But at the end of the day, I can't, if I'm an officer, I can't let someone turn away from me, especially if they've already been fighting with me and I'm telling them to keep their hands where I can see them and they go reaching into the console of their car. I can't wait for them to turn back around. And I don't think it's expected of the officer to wait for them to turn back around and use deadly force before they can return any kind of use of force themselves.
Correct. I mean, you need to be able to obviously articulate why you use deadly force. There's, as we teach in our classes, there's for police officers, there's three things that you have to have to be able to use deadly force on somebody. It's ability, opportunity, and jeopardy. And that is pretty much the standard that's used nationwide. I believe it's actually Supreme Court standard at this point. Does the person have the ability to cause me harm? Do they have a weapon in their hand? Well, if the guy had a knife, he had the ability, opportunity. Is he within the range or within the capabilities of said weapon to be able to cause me great bodily harm? If there's a guy, to use an extreme example, that's across a full-length football field 120 yards away from me, if you count both end zones, 120 yards away from me with a knife saying, I'm not going to drop the knife, and he's charging at me from 120 yards away, I can't shoot him from there because he's causing me no threat. But if the guy's right on top of me with a knife, then yeah, absolutely you can shoot him. And then jeopardy is he put me in active fear of receiving harm. And everybody seems to say or think there has to be an overt act for you to be put in jeopardy, right? He has to point the gun at the police. He has to swipe the knife at the police officers. No. An overt act can be a non-overt act, if you want to call it that. The act of not dropping the knife, the act of not dropping the gun, the act of not complying. All those things can do it. And, you and I have been talking about doing some training videos, and I have a great one for us where we can do an action versus reaction drill and show people why this is the case and why that is that way. So, I've heard from one of my good friends, we're arguing right now about the stuff. And he's like, well, it was 3-on-1. The cops should have, they should have taken him down. In a perfect world, yes, you're right. They should have. But if the guy had a knife in his hand, man, I'm not going to get cut for him. And everybody's saying, oh, the police officer shot him in front of his 3 kids. He was in a vehicle with his 3 kids. If you're that scared of the police, why would you, and the police are so bad, why are you going back to your vehicle with your 3 kids in it? What, are you going to use them? At best, you're using them as human shields. That's great. That's the best case scenario. Now you've made your kids human shields. That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And worst case, you're literally putting your kids in danger because you're so scared of these police officers. The cops have guns drawn on you and you're going to go closer to your kids. How stupid can you be? So there's just a comedy of errors, that in this case that he made. And I get it. People get emotional, like things happen in the heat of the moment. I understand all that. But to say that these cops shot this dude simply because he was black is beyond asinine. There's so much more to this. And I really wish people, and we're going to talk about the media now, would wait to get full information instead of just getting the headline. And I'm going to show you a very good case of this in a second on another article that we read from the Chicago Tribune that you and I went over before the podcast of let's get all the facts before we start condemning people and charging, oh, we need murder charges. We need this. We need that. Again, go back to our episode, Lance LaRusso, episode 5, and you'll understand why it's asinine to make a murder charge right off the bat, because you're actually doing the community an injustice by not investigating the case fully.
Yeah. So and I'm going to ask you a quick question. What do you think? What would you say is the number one reason that people don't seem to understand the rules of engagement with law enforcement officers, and they end up putting themselves in these positions?
I think now it's a lack of respect. I really do think it is. I think it's a complete lack of respect for law enforcement.
Where do you think that lack of respect comes from? Where do you think this is? I mean, it seems to be learned behavior. So where do you think that comes from? And that's a genuine question.
So in my opinion, just from my experience where I saw it, I had one of my good friends ask me this, and I may get vilified for it. It started with our politicians. It started in the Obama administration. I truly do believe that. It started from them, and then it started from the media, and then from social media. Everybody criticizes President Trump for all his faults, and he's got plenty, trust me, for not being presidential for the stuff he says, right? So we had a president for 8 years, mind you, that could have fixed all this systemic racism that's being talked about, but he didn't, apparently, because it's still here. So he was constantly second-guessing law enforcement, making people think law enforcement was the enemy, and just constantly pushing that down people's throats. Then the media seemed to think that was popular opinion. The media seems to be very liberal for whatever reason. I've never quite gotten why they act that way, but they do. So between our politicians and the media, and I think that's cycling down to the home life where parents are telling their kids and, people are just assuming, it's the in vogue thing to do to resist police or not respect them and not, understand they have a job to do. Those guys were bound by law to take him to jail for his warrant. If they do not, it's called violation of oath of office, and they can go to jail for not taking him to jail for the warrant. As much as I didn't want to take that football player to jail that day for his warrant, because I knew it was bullshit, I did. I mean, I called them and they were like, well, and they said some things that I'll leave off the record because it's an official document. But I knew it was BS. He knew it was BS. But we both came to a reasonable conclusion because he was being reasonable about the whole instance. He could have given me an absolute run for my money. He's a Division I athlete, for God's sakes. But he complied. Why? Because his mom was on the scene too, and you can tell he learned it from his mother. He was given a sense of respect and dignity, despite the injustice that he may have been going through at that time, because it probably was an injustice, to be honest with you. But he was respectful and knew the way to make it turn out best for him in the end, and it did. And the charges got dismissed, from what I understand, and he was fine. He just finished out his last year at Mississippi State, and he should be going pro this year. So God knows if he'd resisted or done something crazy that day, what it would have meant for his career. But he came from a good family and was raised the right way. And you could tell he was taught that respect just by the way he interacted with me the whole time. He was visibly upset, but was very cool about the whole thing.
Yeah. So I'm gonna put some numbers out here because you mentioned the word systemic racism, and we're not going to get into necessarily whether that's a real thing or not. But I do want to put out some statistical facts, and I'm gonna put these numbers out. These numbers are close enough. Okay, this is just what I remember off the top of my head. But the article, I do remember them closely enough to where this can be backed up. And I believe these are 2019 stats. I don't think it's 2018. I think it's 2019. You had about 1,000 people shot by officers in officer-involved shootings with the public, right?
Yep.
Out of those 1,000, we had 300 to 400 of those were whites. 200 to 300, somewhere in that number, was blacks. And then when we got down to what they considered unarmed, and again, I'm going to go ahead and say this, and we've said this before, when they are registering these unarmed, they're talking about a firearm. They're not necessarily talking about knives or bats or anything like that, or any other kind of smaller weapons.
Correct.
So when we look at those numbers, we have about 24, I believe. I think the number was 24 of whites that were killed by officers in what they called unarmed.
Correct.
And whether they were unarmed or not, again, that remains to be seen. You actually, at one point, the 2019 numbers registered 9 blacks or African Americans that were killed unarmed by officers, and that number eventually got inflated to 15 because of the criteria. When they added in, well, we're not going to take into account like knives and bats and things like that. So I think the official number ends up being like 24 for whites and 15 for blacks. And then there's some numbers for the other ethnicities and whatnot. Out of those cases, you had only 2 cases that were questionable, that were not considered justifiable overall, and that got a lot of media attention, and that I think the public in general, or at least what's broadcast in the media, would agree that these were questionable shootings. There was 2. Okay, now out of those 2, now this is all of 2019 now, out of those 2 that were against the black civilians at the time, one of those was questionable racism and had some actual indications that it may have been race related. And the other one was not associated with race whatsoever. So we're looking at 2 for all of 2019. Right. And so I think one of the big problems that we have is in the households. And I've spoken with people as well, and the first thing they do is they bring up the word systemic racism. And if you're teaching your household that racism is so systemic that you are in a literal sense being hunted for the purpose of murder, to murder you by your household or the hierarchy within your household, I think this is going to lead to major problems with people resisting officers, not respecting the job of the officers. And it doesn't matter if the officer's white or black or Asian or Latin American. It doesn't matter what they are, right? It's just that law enforcement officers are out to kill you. And I'm here to tell people that that number is 2. That was for a whole year. There was 2. So 13% of the population is blacks, and then the rest is made up by whites and the other ethnicities. And so we're looking at about 46 to 47 million blacks in America. We're looking at the rest being the other ethnicities. And we have 2 instances in 2019. Now, whether or not blacks, whites, Hispanics, whatever ethnicity you are, is experiencing racism on a civilian level, right?
Right.
In other words, I go outside and some other ethnicity, calls me some, cracker white boy or something like that. And I'm not trying to change that. I don't care what this person says. I'm not trying to change that person's opinion. Now, if there was laws that said cracker white boys aren't allowed to do something, then I would be very upset by that. And that would be a call for change. And that would be something that needs to be addressed. That would be a systemic problem where the laws are arranged so that you are specifically called out for this. And so what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing a lot of is that when you teach that this number is not 2 in all of 2019, when you leave it open to the imagination and you just say that, a certain ethnicity is being broadly chased down and hunted by police and murdered. I mean, these are just silly statements. Okay. This is silly to believe that they have a meeting every morning at the police department or at any of these agencies, and they say, listen, today we're targeting, Hispanics, and we need to see how many Hispanics we can kill today. And hopefully you guys can do it in a fashion where we can justify it. And that is just simply not true. Correct. It is so not true that it can't even be talked about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, to give it any kind of credence is asinine at this point.
Well, what it's doing is it's causing, I believe it causes a lot of these problems. It causes people to not respect law enforcement. It causes people to not respect authority in general. And then we end up in these situations, and it's very quick to look back and say, oh, everything I was ever taught was systemic racism. This has to be it. And it doesn't matter if it was a black officer. It doesn't matter if it was 3 black officers on the scene, or if it was 3 white officers that shot a white kid, or vice versa, or any other ethnicity. I don't think it really matters. I think it's just being taught, and it's so widely expressed through the media that this problem is officers murdering people for no reason whatsoever. Now, having said that, do you have a few bad officers here and there? Absolutely you do. Do you have a few bad teachers here and there? Absolutely you do. Yep. Do you have a few, bad firemen here and there? Maybe, I guess. I don't know if firemen can be bad or good or not. I don't know if their job necessarily justifies it either way. Right. But in any profession, you're going to have these things. And of course, you need to deal with the individuals. These individuals, if they are proven to be doing things that are less than what their protocol is calling for, then I think they should be dealt with, and I think that they should have harsh punishments for that. And but until we get an understanding of what the actual numbers are, because when you go to talking actual numbers, I haven't found anyone yet that can give me statistics that back up the word systemic.
I think you're 100% right, and I'm trying to go back to our side-by-side layout. But yeah, you're right. And let's talk about that for real quick. I can give an example of something that happened just recently in the sports world. Okay. So in the NBA, the playoffs are going on right now. For the 12 of you that are watching the NBA, they're having playoffs. Well, in the midst of one of those playoff games, one player called another player. He said something about, "I see you, you bitch ass white boy." Okay, says it to a white. It's a black player. Says this to a white player. Okay, so bitch ass white boy, because that you reminded me of the bitch ass cracker comment. So the news doesn't talk about that part of it. They talk about how the guy the next day came up to and apologized to the NBA player, the other NBA player, and they were like, "Oh, they hugged it out at the beginning. Everything was great. Blah 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 blah." Well, if it had been the other way around, the news would be talking about the comments that were made for weeks on end and not the apology, and an apology wouldn't be enough. Now, I'm all for an apology being enough, as long as that's the standard we set for everybody. People have bad moments, people screw up, it's words. And in the heat of the moment, heat of battle, it's their sport, it's their passion, it's their job. I can see why you might say something stupid like that. So, yeah, forgive the guy, move on from it, but let's have that standard be the same for everybody. And the cool part is the guy that got called the name became the youngest NBA player in history to put up a 40-point triple-double in a playoff game the next day. So how's that for a bitch-ass white boy? Good on you for coming back and doing what you do. And he won the game actually on a buzzer beater. You can't make it up as written for movies. Pretty cool. But that's the world we live in, man. The media just reports things the way they want to. And I want to segue into this about showing how biased their articles can be. And then we'll get into the other couple of topics we want to talk about. So here's an article from the Chicago Tribune. So for those of you that say I always cite Fox News, I don't. Here's something from the Chicago Tribune. Here's the headline. Jacob Blake, shot by police officer in Kenosha, part of Evanston family long associated with community activism. So we're painting a picture. He's a community activist. That's cool. And then we got, obviously, the picture of the police in front of the burning building, not the people that actually set it on fire. So it goes on to talk about how, he grew up as part of a family with deep local ties. He moved here for a better job. Footage from cell phone video across the street. Blake walks from the sidewalk in front of his SUV, the driver's side door, as officers follow him with their guns pointed at him. Blake opens the door, leans the SUV, at which time officer grabs his shirt and opens fire. They keep going on and on about how he's in and out of consciousness. They hope he makes it, all this other stuff. He's a lively young man. He's like a father of my brother. Justin Blake said he's got a hell of a personality and loves people. So they talk about his career in sports. Talk about how one of his family members organized a protest after Martin Luther King died. And then we get into the crux of the article. And how many of you are going to read this big, long article? How many of the public's going to read it? Okay. So let's go all the way down here to the bottom of this article. Right here, I'm going to highlight it for those of you that can't see it. Court records show Blake has a pending criminal case that started last month. Online court records indicate that Kenosha County prosecutors charged Blake on July 6th with third-degree sexual assault, trespassing, disorderly conduct in connection with, wait for it, domestic abuse. An arrest warrant was issued for Blake the following day. Well, that kind of changes the context of why officers were dealing with him, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But all they're going to do is try to be first. They're not going to try to be accurate, and they're going to try to put the headline out there that gets the best reaction, the most reaction. And at this point, like you and I said, it's almost gotten criminal that they're inciting groups of people based off misreporting. They're inciting certain groups of people that are very passionate about their cause, and I understand the passion for true racism. I understand that passion. I understand the anger for when true racism happens. I don't think anybody doesn't understand that. But the media is taking advantage of groups of people, white, black, purple, pink, that believe in this, and they're inciting riots at this point based on their reporting. And it's just, to me, it's crazy.
Well, I mean, you nailed it with it's the media. I mean, clearly this is where people get their information from. And the stats and the numbers that I put out for 2019 earlier in the entire statement about systemic racism, that's not to go and say that there is no racism. That's just to go and say that when the media frames something and categorizes it to this degree, and it's absolutely inaccurate. They have no actual numbers or facts or data to back this up. As a matter of fact, the actual data and facts are quite to the contrary of what they're reporting. And when you have the media that's broadcasting this day in and day out and day in and day out, you get to a point where you can't really blame the individuals for not knowing any better, and because you'd have to do some extensive research to come up with these numbers that I have. I mean, if I just went off of what I heard from the media every day for the last 10 or 15 or 20 or 30 years, I would think that systemic racism was such a massive problem that everyone should hide from the police. Because if you encountered an opposite or a different ethnicity in any fashion, and he had a badge on, you should run from this guy because he's going to kill you. And it's just not true. I mean, and again, we try to call it the name of our show is the Unfiltered Truth, right? When we're looking at these statistics and this actual data, it just clearly is not true. No matter what anyone says, the data is not there to back it up. And and a lot of times we get confronted, and I know both of us have had people try to call us out on, by saying, well, no, that's not accurate what you said. And it's like, well, okay, well then provide the data that shows us that is in direct opposition of the data that we presented here. And these are FBI numbers. I mean, this is all information that you can look up. You can look up the 2019 FBI report on police officer involved shootings, and you're going to find these exact numbers. And so the media does a massive disservice to everyone, and I don't see it getting better. I mean, I just see it getting worse every day.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to a point now where, and I think we're already there, where law enforcement can't do any of their job. I mean, if you legitimately had a lady and someone came up and snatched her baby out of the stroller when she's walking across the parking lot, you're going to have a certain group of people that'll petition in favor of the suspect stealing the lady's baby. And to me, I don't know where you go from there. I don't know how you correct that problem, other than we've got to get some kind of accountability for reporting to be done accurately and fairly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're 100% right. And I think you made a very good point. Someone wanted to bring up an example of a real life thing that I encountered in my law enforcement career as far as not being able to do my job goes. So many of you know that James and I are based out of the metro Atlanta area. And there is a DA down here named Paul Howard, who was actually just handily defeated by Fannie Willis, I believe is her name, in the DA runoff in Fulton County. And he is very famous for keeping track of how many police officers he's prosecuted in his lifetime. Keeping prosecuted, not convicted. I think he's convicted 1 out of 60 something he's prosecuted. So that goes to show you, what's going on there. Well, the police department I used to work for was within Cobb County, Georgia, which happens to border Fulton County, which is where Paul Howard was prosecutor at. Well, my old police chief, who's no longer the chief of where I used to work, he had a policy that if somebody was running from us in a vehicle, or even on foot at that point, because we literally bordered, and they crossed into Fulton County, we were not allowed to pursue that person. And so many of us were angry. We're like, this is bull crap. I can't believe you don't want us pursuing it in the county, this, that, and the other. Well, the chief is like, I'm afraid if you do your job and you get in a shooting, God forbid, that he's going to try to put you in prison. And frankly, it's not worth you risking your life for anything. And I brought up that very thing to the chief. I said, Chief, well, what if a baby gets kidnapped from a stroller? Because it's funny you use that analogy. It's like, well, a baby gets kidnapped from a stroller and the guy's running into Fulton County and I chase him into Fulton County. You're telling me I can't do that? And he looked at me and said something that always stuck with me. He goes, if it's worth your freedom, every bit of money you have in your bank account and your career, go ahead. And I had to take pause for a minute and I'm like, wow. So that's a heck of a decision to have to make. But then when you see everything that happened with Paul Howard in the past 6 months, you're like, well, the dude was right. And that's the world we live in. And criminals knew that, and they would break into cars all the time in the south side of our city and run straight into Fulton County because they knew we'd literally turn the blue lights off and turn around and go back where we came from. And you want to talk about a sanctuary county, that's one in Georgia for you.
Yeah, ultimately it's just a huge shame that we have this lack of ability, it seems nowadays, to understand that law and order is such an essential part of our society. And of course, when it comes home to roost, people all of a sudden want to have the police involved. Someone breaks in their house, they're going to call the police right away, and they're going to expect that they're going to show up. And as a matter of fact, if the police don't show up fast enough, then they're going to jump onto them for that as well. So it's really a no-win situation until we get some accountability back to the individuals. And listen, we've all done stuff that we regret in the past, and we've all done things that we probably shouldn't have. And when you're young, you do little things and you consider those little crimes that are insignificant or whatnot, like speeding. Everybody does some form of this to a certain degree on a daily basis, but as you get older and you start to understand, to put yourself into a law enforcement officer's shoes, right? We don't live back in the time, I think, when you and I were growing up as kids. We don't live in that era where, someone would run from the cops and the cops would chase them. And for the most part, you knew they weren't going to gun you down when you caught them.
Sure.
They catch them and they take them back to the police station. They call their parents and they're like, yeah, I was running from the cops and they caught me. And this isn't the Dukes of Hazzard anymore,
No.
The time that we live in, you walk up to certain vehicles, and they may have made the decision to end your life right then and there without any kind of altercation or any kind of interaction. So I would challenge anyone to to try to put themselves in the shoes of an officer that's walking up to an unknown in the middle of the night, or to a car on a traffic stop in the middle of the night, 1 o'clock in the morning. And you're walking up to that car in the dark by yourself. You have no idea who's in that car. You have no idea the position of the person in the car, and you have no idea the disposition of the person in the car. And I would love for people to at least take a moment to put themselves in that situation. Think about, how safe would you feel? How quickly might you respond to something or some kind of a threat? And it's a very dangerous job. It doesn't get near the credit that it should get. And as long as we have the media that just continues to compound the situation with just piling on to every single instance that an officer does their job and trying to turn it into something criminal, the society is just going to wither away, and it's going to continue to do so.
Yeah, it's, absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. And that's, at some point it became cool for the bad guys to be like the winners. Like right now, the roles are kind of reversed where everybody wants the villain to win.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where we've had a societal breakdown, just with our kids aren't taught respect. They're just not taught certain things, and it causes a huge issue. And like you said, with your statistics, does it happen? Yes. I mean, I'm not going to pretend like, some bad things don't happen, that police don't, there's some police that don't do bad things, because there are some. But it's very few and far between. One bad police officer doesn't make the whole bunch bad, just like one white person doesn't make all white people bad, and one bad black person doesn't make all black people bad. I mean, that's just facts. And society has just taken a lack of personal responsibility for anything anymore. And anytime that it gets shot, and it's actually a request that we had for a topic to talk about, anytime a police officer is involved in an incident like that, it's extremely traumatic for everybody involved. Actually, I was just looking at an article where the guy that said he filmed the video is traumatized and can't sleep. Okay, I get it. Yeah, sure. I mean, it's traumatic. Like, seeing somebody shot in front of you is not normal. And the ramifications of a shooting involving police officers affects everybody involved, and any kind of violence affects everybody. And it's just truly tragic, and it can cause lots of other issues down the road. And yeah, does it suck that that guy's kids saw him get shot? Yeah, it sucks, man. It's terrible. But again, there's things that could have been done by the kid's father that probably would have made that not happen, i.e. going to jail and not fighting the police. So, I mean, that's kind of my final thoughts on that whole incident is, if he had complied, I think we can safely say, based on your statistics, that he'd be completely, have the same amount of holes that he had the day before he got shot, and he would be fine and probably be in jail, or maybe even be back at home right now. He may have been able to bond out on his charges. The warrant said there it was no bond, so he may have to sit in jail for a little bit to see a judge. But yeah, I mean, that's where we're at. So
let me ask you this: what do you think? Do you think the public lacks enough knowledge, or lacks the ability, or the logic to believe all of the stuff that's being reported in the media? Do you think there's an overwhelming majority of the public that it's just that dumb?
I don't even know that it's so much dumb as they are lazy. So most of the public, they'll read a headline, right? And then that's what they go with. So let's just use a headline that we've seen. Police officer shoots black man. Okay. That's the one we see a lot. Just being real. A lot of people are going to see that by, oh my God, the police shot a minority again. Well, if you get in the article and read down, maybe the guy was armed with an AK-47. Maybe the guy was an active shooter. Maybe the guy was all this other stuff. But people aren't going to read that. People are extremely lazy. They scroll through their Facebook feed. They see a meme that's posted about, whatever the, social justice warrior of the day phrase is. And that's what they go based on, and that's what they make their assumptions on. I don't think it's an intelligence thing as much as I think it's a pure absolute laziness to be able to go back and research the facts. And the public lacks patience because they won't wait for the investigation to happen. I mean, the governor in Wisconsin, in my opinion, is to blame for a lot of this. I mean, instead of saying, hey, everybody, let's wait, for the investigation to be done thoroughly, he says that we all know this isn't the first time a black man's been shot in broad daylight by the police. How is that helping anybody? I'll challenge you to, how does that help the black community? How is it going to help their cause to what they truly believe in to be furthered? No, what he's doing is he's inciting riots based on his words. and he's causing more racism down the line because you're going to have groups of people that are like, well, look, now they're burning down stuff. So they're going to act like that an entire group of people is this one small group that's burning shit down. And
yeah, but
as a people.
So you've also got the media, though, that would like to portray that everyone backs their viewpoint, that it's the majority of America that views things the way that they're broadcasting things. Do you believe that's true?
Yeah, I think the media does believe it. I truly think.
I mean, do you think that reasonable people actually believe that as much as the media thinks they believe that?
Oh, no, I think it's a very small portion. I've always said it to all my friends. I think I've said it on here before. I honestly think 80-90% of America pretty much believes the same things. We get in our little tribal ways because he's my Democrat friend, he's my Republican friend, blah, 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 blah. But I think when it comes down to it, a lot of us do believe in the same things and understand within reason, the same things. But the media uses that very loud 10%, to basically perpetuate and put it in your face that this is what's actually happening. Because to be frank, they control it all because they report it. It's what we Google. It's what we see. Yeah. So yeah, the perception is going to be everybody believes it. But do I truly think people believe that? No. I think a lot of people are afraid to say they don't believe it because they're afraid to be labeled racist or an extremist or all these other things. Because I can tell you that when I was a police officer, I had so many people come up to me when I was a police officer, thanking me for my service of all races, ages, demographics. I've had people come up to the car and pray with me, buy me lunch, buy me dinner, just want to take a minute of my time to say thank you. And those were people from all walks of life. I'm sure there were some Republicans in there, some Democrats in there. I mean, it is what it is, but the media constantly reports what they report to divide the people and frankly to get clicks and make money, because that's how they make their money, is viewership and clicks to get advertising dollars. And that's why it's corrupted, is money. Pure, plain and simple.
Yeah, it has a way of doing that to most everything, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I mean, look at our politicians. So I saw a funny that hit memes the other day. It's like everybody talks about how all police officers are corrupt. They're like, well, what about our politicians? Why aren't we holding them accountable? And I mean, yeah, you can swing the thing any way you want. So it's right now, man.
I'll touch on the big topic of at least this morning since yesterday evening. We had the DNC convention, I guess, last week, and you had the RNC that started yesterday evening.
Yep.
And I think one of the first articles that I saw this morning when I opened my phone was CNN was being called out for attempting to do their version of what they call a fact checker for the RNC as it's going on live. And someone or some group had called them out for, well, why didn't you do that for the DNC?
Right.
And their response so far, I want to say it was Cuomo's response. His response was, well, that's because the Republicans are liars and the Democrats aren't, basically, is what he got to. I mean, that was essentially what he said. Because we don't have to fact check the Democrats because they're so insanely honest. And we know this so thoroughly to be the case that we don't have to fact check them. And I wonder how many people actually saw that article and just said, yeah, that sounds absolutely right. Like, yeah, you don't have to fact check the Democrats now, but you definitely want to fact check the Republicans. And I don't believe that the general public is that dumb. I think it's going to backfire on the media at some point because of their assumption that the public is so ignorant or is just so uneducated that they're not going to be able to see through or to be able to see around, what you just said, money, ratings, who's trending what, who's popular with this and popular with that. I've never really understood, the popularity contest between the media outlets. I mean, obviously, competitors in one arena are going to try to outdo the other ones. But I would think in a day and age, you would try to appeal to both sides so that you would be known as the one that can win both sides of the argument, or that can win on both sides of the aisle. Yeah. We report very fairly for Democrats. We also report very fairly for Republicans. And I believe that there's a lot of bias on both sides. And I believe there's a lot of inaccuracies on both sides.
Yep.
But when you have a news organization as large as CNN that comes out and says we have to fact check the RNC, but we don't have to fact check the DNC, it just shows me that they must be that ignorant, or they have some other kind of ploy or a plot or something that they're trying to engage in with the public that's going to sway perception in one direction or the other. So it's very it's not unbiased. It's very much biased.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's kind of what I want to see happen, at least with the media at this point, is, call it down the middle, quit reporting stuff to make certain groups of people look certain ways. Frankly, it's like they want the riots to happen so they can say, you've got these groups of people, whether it be young people, white people, black people, pink people, whatever, that's doing all this stuff. They can report on that, right? Like I saw a picture today of a guy that pulled a gun on a reporter, stuck it right in the reporter. I think he was with the Blaze. He's out in Wisconsin covering the thing, and then all you see is a picture of a black dude with a gun in this reporter's face. Well, what does that make people think? It makes people think that all black people are violent. That's not true. It's just simply not. But it's the perception that's out there, and it allows them to perpetuate more racism and allows that to grow and feeds that cancer, because it is a cancer. And that's what they're doing, is feeding it. And it's terrible. I mean, the media has to be held accountable for what they report. They should, people need to be careful. Celebrities need to be careful. Heck, even we have to be careful. When we say things, we can incite violence. The media can incite violence and say things that cause people to lose their lives. I mean, an officer in Wisconsin got hit over the head with a brick and knocked unconscious. And I blame the media and the governor of Wisconsin for that. Yes, you have to blame the person that hit the officer in the head with a brick. Yes. But I would venture to say that those emotions were invoked by things that were said by the media, perpetuated by the media, and perpetuated by their politicians. And that's a problem. So until they're held accountable, man, this is going to keep happening. And it's sad.
Yeah, it's so let's move on then. So we don't beat this horse anymore. I think we've definitely hashed this one out, and I had some notes here. So getting back to, let's ask a really strong question here, since we're talking about politics, right?
Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen in November?
Man, well, number one,
just a prediction that has nothing to do. You don't have to give your opinion. Just a prediction on what you think it looks like, the landscape looks like. You like how I framed this for you?
Yeah, thanks for that. You're backing me in a corner, buddy. One of my good friends is watching the podcast, texting me because he's angry at me right now, but I still love you, buddy. So,
do you want me to go first? I can go first. I did one of these back in 2015.
Yep.
I did early on.
I actually have a $100 bet with my friend on this. So $100 bet.
And all right, and a lot of people that know me know this about me, right? So back in 2015, when Trump first announced his candidacy, and it had nothing to do with me favoring Trump over anyone else. It had nothing to do with that. Although at this point right now, I'll say that I do, just because of the particular candidates. But in 2015, or whenever it was that he launched his candidacy, I don't remember if that was like late 14 or early 2015.
Yeah.
But when he launched his run for president, his presidential bid, someone asked me. It was a group of people that asked me. We were sitting in a small group, and they asked me what I thought would happen, and they prefaced it with, "Well, this is supposed to be Hillary's election, right? Like this has been built up for years and decades, and this is her time." So, and I think it was the general consensus that she was supposed to win, like she had to win, that she was going to win, and there was no argument about it, right? There was no debating. And I said, no. I said Trump will definitely, he'll win. And they said, well, why do you think that? And I said, well, because that's what successful people that have the mindset that he portrays to have, that's what they do. And I'll back that up a little bit. This is the mindset of highly successful individuals tend to not lose at anything they do, because their mindset is so strong in the belief that they create the environment around them, and they don't have any form of doubt or disbelief in that faith that they have. They know that if they want to, if he wanted to go build a building in Manhattan and he was told that he couldn't do that, he found a way to do it every single time. And it's not just Trump. This is on both sides of the aisle, right? And at the time, Trump was a Democrat, I think, when a lot of this was, a lot of his success was going on. But This is across the board. The Bill Gateses of the world, the Trumps, a lot of the prosperity speakers, the Tony Robbins, all of these folks, they firmly believe that they create their own reality with their mindset. And people like that just don't tend to lose. And so for that very reason, I told them if we took politics completely aside, I said, Trump's going to win the election no matter what. Now, as we move towards the election, this small group of people re-ask the question. They're like, hey, James, are you ready to change that? Because we had some money on the table as well. And they said, are you ready to change that? Because you see all the polls are saying, Hillary's going to win. We already all agree that Hillary's supposed to win this election. And my response was, no, that's not how these kind of business people work. They win at everything they do because of the structure of their mindset. And I'll go ahead and give mine. I think we're going to see a colossal landslide. I'm calling it right now. 3:12 p.m. on August the 25th, 2020. I'm calling it an enormous landslide like we may not have ever seen before in a presidential election.
Okay, so I'll piggyback off that. So I will agree with you on that. So here's what I told my buddy Michael Hobson. I could actually go pull up our text message conversation from months ago, before any of this was predetermined about who was going to be put in for the Democratic Party, right? He's like, oh, Bernie's going to get it. Bernie's going to get it. Blah, blah, blah. They owe him from last time. I was like, bro, I love you, but they're never going to let Bernie in. Something is going to happen where they can steal it from him. And this was pre-corona, dude. Something is going to happen where the Democrats can steal it from him, because I truly believe Bernie Sanders fits more of what the Democratic Party feels like. I'm not advocating for anything he says or does, just like I won't for Trump. But I truly believe that he would be somebody that can inspire the Democratic Party, that could even inspire moderates, even though he's not, like, your independents, just because his point of view offers so much of a change from what we're used to, which is kind of what you've seen in America. We have the very far left with Obama and the very far right with Trump. We don't really get in the middle anymore. I think our last middle-of-the-road president, if I could safely say it, was probably Reagan. Everybody else has kind of been, really far left or right. So anyways, I told him, I said, buddy, there's no way Bernie gets it. And Bernie was looking strong at that point. And I was like, just like in 2016, it's not going to happen, bro. Something's going to happen to where they can steal it from him. No way, no blah, blah, blah. I said, they're going to put Biden in there because he's Hillary's boy, because it's along the lines of what you said. It's his turn because he was Team Hillary back in the day, and he was Team Obama. And, he was all along with them. So they're going to put Biden in there because he deserves it, right? Not because he's the best qualified candidate for the Democratic Party, because I can think of, Vernon Jones from Georgia. I would vote for him for president. He's a registered Democrat. He spoke at the Republican convention last night. Don't hear a lot about that in the mainstream media. I'd vote for the guy in a heartbeat. Black dude from DeKalb County, Georgia. You got my vote, bro. I like what you talk about. So anyways, they stick same old Biden in there, right? You stick, you hear this whole thing, Democratic Party, the old white guy is responsible for everything bad in America. Well, that's your nominee. Yeah. You're not going to excite your voter base with that. You're not. You're just not. So Trump's voter base, right, wrong, or indifferent, is very passionate. They're going to show out in droves. And I think Trump wins the election by 5 points. I'll call it, which is a landslide. I think 5% is what he wins by. I don't think it'll be anywhere as close as it was with Hillary, because I think most of America was more excited with Hillary than they were with Trump.
Yeah, I think you had a 2 point, the electoral, it was a 2 point with Trump last time, correct?
Yeah, but I think Hillary ended up getting a popular vote. I think if we go back and verify that, I think she did win the popular vote, but Trump got the electoral college, which is what our country does. Right. Again, it's gone, both ways, where it hasn't worked out for one party or the other.
Yeah.
But yeah, and here's what I think the media is doing. And I'm going to talk to my liberal friends here for them to think about this for a second. I think the media is hurting Biden's chances by the way they report this police stuff, by the way they report the racism, by the way that they report it. I truly think if maybe they reported it down the middle a lot more, that Biden would in fact have a better chance, because people are so sick of what they feel like is hyper liberalism that they won't even look at somebody from the left. Your independents won't, because they're like, well, if this is where we're going to go, why would I vote for them? And I think the media is absolutely helping Trump a lot more than they're hurting him. I think it's shown with the whole COVID thing. I think it's shown the racism thing, because, let's take COVID. Everybody said, oh, if you lock down and you have strict lockdowns for 2 weeks, we're going to be back to normal. New York City, are they back to normal? No. They have some of the strictest lockdowns on the planet. They're not back to normal. California, same thing. then you've got countries like Sweden that didn't do anything, and they're doing their thing. They're right back to normal. Anyways, they'll blame anything they can on Trump. They're politicizing this virus. Whether or not it was intentionally created to dethrone Trump, that's a conspiracy theory. Whatever. Either way, we can say the media has politicized the virus. They politicize police shootings. They politicize racism instead of actually addressing the issues and sitting down and talking about it. They don't. They just shove the penny down the throat. So long story short, 3:17 p.m. on August 25th, I say Trump by 5 points. So I think he kills the popular vote. I think he kills the Electoral College. I really do.
Yeah. Getting back to you when you mentioned that the media seems to be hurting the Democrat Party. Number one thing that I think it hurts the Democrat Party is going to be that the Democrat Party really is it's a very few of them have pushed so far left that they've made that popular in the media. And I mentioned this last week. I feel bad for the Democrat Party in a certain way, just because I feel like their party's been robbed from them. There was a point in time where you might actually really, regardless of what party you were registered as or whatnot, you might, leading up to the election, you might realistically be considering either opponent. I'm not so sure how much of that goes on today. And I know that's a big talk about they have to do this and do that because, they need to appeal this way and appeal that way to voters and whatnot. I mean, there's so much media coverage, and frankly, most of it's negative towards the current president, that I think that it leaves the Democrat Party being robbed, and they have no talking points other than the things that I took from the DNC, from the Democrat convention, was that ultimately taxes would be raised, that they would do away with the tax cuts that's already been put in place. Mm-hmm. And whether or not you agreed with the tax cuts or they were enough for your liking or whatnot, they were still tax cuts on the citizens in the United States. They're talking about undoing that. So there was, and I think Biden's quoted specifically saying to one guy, he says something to the effect like, "Oh no, your taxes are definitely going to go up, not down," and so you've got a talking point of tax increase. But the primary thing I think that is the problem for the Democrat Party right now is it's so negative. Everything that's talked about is so negative, and so it's just anti this, and and Trump did this, and he's so bad for it, and he talked this way, and they don't really have any policy bullet points or talking points to really bring up to support any of that. And so when I watched some of the DNC last week, the convention, it was just such a negative connotation. It was such a gloomy, kind of dark kind of thing. And I think the Republicans really have it going for them because I don't think patriotism is gone in the United States the way the media would like to portray that it is. And I think when you're saying a lot of things that are patriotic, and you're saying a lot of things that are uplifting and that point towards success, or that point towards, bringing people, lifting people up from the positions they're in and letting them do greater things, or creating a system where they're allowed to, or where they have the ability to do greater things. I think this is just so much of a great thing to see. And I think if there is such thing as the middle of the road, the moderate, the undecided voters, I think what they're going to see out of the Republicans over the next couple of days as well is that it's a very positive message. It's an uplifting message. It's always talking about what we can do. And I think anyone that understands success, you have to understand this. You don't do things to gain success. You bring success to things, and then things become accomplished, right? So if you are constantly thinking, man, I'm in this bad place, I've got to get out of here. Hopefully this door opens up for me and I can do this. Well, you're probably going to continue to get more of that same lack. Yep. And when you really speak of, that the United States is great. This is the land of opportunity. This is, these doors and avenues are being opened up for us so that we can better ourselves constantly. It's so much more of a positive message that breeds so much more of a positive result. Yeah. And I think that I think people are smart enough. I think they're just smart enough to see through it. And I think this is going to be a huge loss for the Democrats this time around. I don't know how their party recovers from this.
I don't think it will. I think, eventually, I think I'm going to make a bold prediction, say in the next 2-3 election cycles, that we're really going to see another party kind of start taking over, because I think people are kind of sick of having the traditional two-party system. So I really think you are going to see a viable third-party candidate probably in the next couple elections pop up. It wouldn't surprise me if it was next election, but I think you're really going to start seeing it, because the reason why I say that is you're seeing political parties now trying to get third-party people taken off their ticket because they're in runoff elections, and this third-party person is harming their chances of getting reelected because they're taking 5 and 10% of the vote away. So that tells you that America is kind of getting fed up with the status quo. And I think you're going to see it soon. But as far as this election goes, I think you're right. I think people are sick of, the negativity. They're going to go towards the party they feel that uplifts America more and uplifts their daily life more. And I honestly can say, I think right now that is the Republican Party, for all their faults. That's what they do. The message is much different between the two conventions. I mean, you look at the diversity between the two conventions, it's not even close. The Republican parties already show more diversity in one night than the entire DNC did. And go back and look at the guest speakers for both of the conventions, and that'll tell you all you need to know, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So
it's an amazing thing to see that the party of tolerance and diversity is, their actions just prove it on a daily basis. And again, it's not necessarily coming from a biased point of view, whether I'm a Republican or a Democrat or, an independent or whatnot. It's just, just looking at everything on its surface and evaluating it. I wouldn't want to be a part of number one, I wouldn't want to be a part of a party that the only talking point that you have is how bad the other people are. You got to bring something to the table. I didn't see a single piece of legislative ideals or suggestions or a plan that was being brought in to do this or that. I didn't see any of that from the Democratic convention. It was basically just a Trump bashing fest. And I don't think anyone, whether you're Republican or Democrat, I don't think anyone wants to see that. It's a big turnoff. It's not a good look for you to just constantly bash the other people instead of trying to uplift your side or to try to shine on your side. I think the positive is always going to win over the negative in those situations. And again, I think the public's smart enough to know the difference.
Yeah, I think you're right, man. Bunch of good points there. So yeah, you and I both got landslide victories for Trump, just because I think that's what's going to happen. I guess we'll get to wrapping it up since we're about at the hour and a half mark. Just to recap, kind of what we talked about, and leaving any final thoughts you want to drop on it, man. Obviously, the Jacob Blake shooting. I'll leave you guys with these thoughts. No matter how you feel about the police, no matter how you feel, no matter your political affiliation, no matter how you feel about certain groups of people, y'all need to let the facts come out, period. Okay? We need to quit jumping to conclusions the day after. I did it with a couple incidents shortly after I got out of police work. I kind of let my passion get ahead of me. Sit back, wait on the facts, be patient. It's the world of instant information, so it's not like you're going to really have to wait that long. Sit back, make an educated decision. You make your cause look that much smarter at that point. And then decide on it based on that. Don't decide on it based on something you see the day of, or from one news outlet, or a lot of the stuff that I've seen people citing as fact, or things the guy's family said, which they're going to always side with their family member. That's to be expected. So what I would leave you all with today: sit back, be patient. Remember how we used to do it when we all grew up, when information wasn't instant, you had to wait for it. Just make an educated decision. Our world can't afford to jump to conclusions constantly. So please, for the health of our country, just make an educated decision, and please be patient. That's all I got to leave you with. So James, I'll leave the last thoughts with you.
Yeah. So real quick, we'll cover the sponsor spot again. It's been running at the bottom of the banner the entire show, I believe, actually. North Cobb Spine and Nerve, that's in Ackworth, Georgia, guys. If you have any chiropractic or physical medicine needs, make sure you check out the ladies over at North Cobb Spine and Nerve. That's northcobbspine.com. Again, that's located in Ackworth, Georgia. They've provided a lot of generous donations for us, and we really appreciate what they've done. We'll be highlighting some other sponsors, I believe, next week. I've got a couple things lined up for us. Also looking forward in the next episode or two, I have a great idea, I think. I do want to cover some, it's not really preparedness. I want to look at, we're going to start covering some products to a certain degree in generality. And they can be viewed as preparedness products, but I think it would be good to highlight some certain applications since we're both, Second Amendment kind of guys. And obviously if you look in our backgrounds here, you'll see that we've always got some kind of tactical gear or whatnot. I think it would be good for maybe us to highlight some stuff. I know when I first got into this, I didn't know, I didn't know how to build a battle belt. I didn't know which products to use. I didn't know what was the stuff that's currently on the market. Back when I used to skateboard, I could have told you every wheel and bearing and kind of trucks or what kind of deck, and grip tape you were supposed to get. And I didn't know these kind of things when I came into to getting into firearms, and I think it would be good for us to do an episode. I want to hear what you guys think about us doing an episode like that, where we could highlight maybe some different applications for again, battle belts, or we could do your plate carrier setups, or the actual weapons themselves. I think it'd be good for us to cover one of those episodes. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think we get down and get with it. We're going to be doing some filming here shortly offline too, which will be good. And yeah, I'm down with it, man.
Cool. Well, hopefully we can organize that in the next week or so. Maybe that'll even be next week's topic if we don't have a guest. But it's looking like we're going to have a guest next week. Again, we've talked about this guest for a couple of weeks now. I just haven't gotten it nailed down. But I will make sure that we do our best to get that tackled this week and have that ready by next week. If not, it will be very soon. So. Thank everybody for watching. I want to shout out to Drew, who just put that comment up a few minutes ago. It says you guys are rocking it. Love to you both. Same back to you, Drew. We really appreciate any of the support. All the viewers, RJ, he's always on every episode. I think we've had RJ watching it live. So just want to thank him very much, and all the other viewers out there. And also want to thank the viewers that'll ultimately catch this on the recorded versions as well. You can catch us on Facebook on the Unfiltered Truth. You can probably catch it on our personal pages if you're in that select, very valuable group of people that are able to be in our personal Facebook pages, or you can also catch it on YouTube. So we appreciate the support and keep it up.
Yep. Everybody have a good week.